Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Superheroes, Movies, and Superhero Movies. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzel.
And today we're talking about Batman Begins, released in 2005, directed by Christopher Nolan, written by Christopher Nolan and David S. Goyer from a story by David S. Goyer, and starring Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Katie Holmes, Gary Oldman, Cillian Murphy, Tom Wilkinson, Rutger Hauer, Ken Watanabe, Morgan Freeman, and Liam Neeson. Before we really before we jump into the movie, I feel like we got to put ourselves back into the early 2000s,
Agreed. Yeah.
Because this was still it's weird. I was just thinking about it right before we started recording that this movie to me feels older than Garden State in my brain, even though Garden State came out a year before it did. For some reason, this movie, I don't know, just feels like it came out longer ago. However, it came out pretty early on in the whole kind of superhero film renaissance, if you will. Spider-Man was in 2002, only 3 years before this. We'd had a couple movies in 2003 and 2004.
Right. This came out in 2005. Is that right?
2005, yeah.
And that was, I think, the same year Fantastic Four came out.
That sounds about right. A year before Superman Returns. I mean, it was, but most of all, it was the first Batman movie we'd had since 1997, and that movie was Batman and Robin. So this was this was a pretty big deal.
What's crazy though is that the gap between Batman and Robin and Batman Begins feels so long.
I know. It really does.
And it's like 8 years.
Right. I was talking about that, with my wife. I think it was, I forget what the gap, it might've been a gap like that, 8 years between Batman and Robin and Batman Begins felt like it took an eternity. And yet, like, the last 10 years of my life have gone by so fast, it feels like. So yeah, just kind of crazy how time works as you get older, I guess. But no, I remember being super excited about this movie. There was a teaser trailer in front of M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, and it was.
And I saw that because I saw The Village, I'm pretty sure, on opening night.
Yeah, I did too. I think the only reason I saw The Village, I mean, I don't know. I was at the time, I feel like I was a M. Night Shyamalan fan. I enjoyed The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, and I think Signs came out before the Village.
Village was his fourth one.
And I like Signs. So I was looking forward to seeing The Village, but I was really looking forward to seeing the Batman Begins teaser, which I believe I had read that was going to be before this movie. And like I said, the teaser didn't show much. It was shots of Wayne Manor, some shots of Bruce when he's in the other country, like in the prison and stuff, and climbing the mountain. And then at the very end, it shows a quick flash of him in the costume. I think it was really just like the cowl even. And that was enough to get me super excited about the movie.
Understandable.
Yeah. I remember too when Christian Bale was announced to be playing Bruce Wayne / Batman. And I was super excited about that. I was working at Blockbuster at the time, and I told one of my coworkers, I was like, Christian Bale is going to be Batman. And he didn't know who it was. So I was like, rent American Psycho. And so
that's how I knew him.
Yeah. I knew Christian Bale from Newsies. I used to watch Newsies as a kid all the time. And I really, so I guess I've been a fan of his since Newsies. I suppose.
Somehow I've seen the beginning of Newsies, and I'm wondering if when we were rooming, if like I
played it or something. It's possible. Yeah.
Because I remember saying it's a musical,
and
I remember them, dancing through the street trying to sell newspapers.
Right. Yeah. Apparently, it wasn't originally a musical, and Christian Bale signed on to the movie, and then they turned it into a musical, and he didn't want it to be a musical, which is actually kind of amazing because he gives 100% in the movie, and but apparently he was kind of miserable at the time because he was wanting to be taken seriously as an actor, and now he's in a Disney musical.
I just envision him like being like, yes, I got a movie, and they're like, all right, it wasn't going to be a musical, but now it is. And he's like, no.
Yeah, he's like, what? So there's going to be singing and dancing. He's like, what?
Did he do good?
I don't actually know how Newsies did financially.
No, I mean, was he?
Yeah, he's awesome in it. Yeah, he's great. Cool. So yeah, I've Christian Bale is. I'm trying to think of like what movie. I know I had seen movies of his.
So the movie that I actually do remember seeing even before American Psycho was Swing Kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he's like, it's about these kids in the underground music scene during Nazi Germany.
Right. Right.
And he's in that, and I really liked him in that. Um
That's what I was about to say. Is I can't really remember what movies. I know I had seen movies of his, and Swing Kids was probably one of them.
mhm.
In between Newsies and American Psycho, but like I was drawing a blank at the moment. But
That's the only one I know. And you watch have seen way more movies than I have. So
but I got to see American Psycho in the theater, and so I'm a big Christian Bale fan, and I was a big Christian Bale fan even before he became Batman. So when it was announced that he was playing Batman, I was like, this is a perfect choice. Um, so yeah, so I actually, but fast forwarding now to the movie coming out. Actually, before the movie comes out, hold on, let's stay in the past still. I remember seeing set photos of the Tumblr, and so it was like the first look at the Batmobile.
I think I remember that too. Yeah.
It looked like it was maybe on the grounds outside Wayne Manor, or maybe on the grounds outside the Batcave. And they were really dark. It was at night. So there were some lights on the tumbler. So you couldn't get like the greatest detail. But I remember seeing those huge back tires and being like, what? It almost gave me like a bad feeling. I was like, this almost looks too ridiculous.
I didn't like it.
Yeah. And
I was so strong on just the idea of the 1989
right, the Burton Batmobile.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. The sleek look and everything of it. Yeah. So seeing those huge tires, I was like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? But clearly the Tumblr came out just fine. But so yeah, now let's fast forward to 2005. I actually don't have a memory of seeing this for the first time, but I do remember driving out to the Mall of Georgia to see it in the IMAX, even though it wasn't shot in IMAX. I think it might have been the first movie. Did this come out before Matrix Revolutions?
That's a good question because I'm trying to remember. 2003 was Reloaded, and then I think Revolutions came out for the year after, so it would have been.
It's actually
it would have been after. Am I wrong on that?
Revolutions was 2003. It says so. Reloaded must have been 2002.
Wow. Okay.
No, they're both 2003. Okay, so I actually the first time I ever went to the Mall of Georgia to see something in the IMAX was The Matrix Revolutions. So this was probably the second time I had driven to the IMAX to go see a movie. But I do remember seeing it at the Mall of Georgia IMAX. So clearly I was a big fan of this movie because I made the trek out there to go see it again.
I might have seen it 3 times in the theater. I can't remember if I encouraged my dad to go or not. But like I said, I saw it the first time and then I went on a date the second time. So maybe 3 times, at least 2.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I think I'm sure I saw it at least 3 times, if not more. So yeah, I was I loved it. I thought
for me to go
amazing.
see a movie, maybe not so much back then, but more than once is a big deal.
Right. Yeah.
Well, so that's something that I was kind of forgot about, especially in the beginning. I guess later on you don't see him too much, but how much Thomas Wayne was in the movie.
Yes, Thomas Wayne is, and that was actually the first note I wrote was, what do you think of Linus Roach as Thomas Wayne?
That was way better. So not to compare, and I don't know if I should bring it up. Like I was thinking about bringing up the Joker.
Oh, the Joaquin Phoenix Joker
and Thomas Wayne's
portrayal in that.
Yeah, or sure. Like so basically this is like more of the Thomas Wayne that I would expect, because you can't have Bruce Wayne's, idol, his father, which, how young was he when? I mean, he knew him pretty well, especially in this movie. He was definitely old enough to have
memories and everything,
a close relationship with him, and he's got to be someone that he can look up to, and that was definitely the case in this movie. He seemed to be a very, moral standing, good father that cared about his family and wanted not just he wanted It wasn't him, it was Rachel that mentions it about the vengeance versus
Right. But he also was a character
or
that really cared about his city. How
yes.
he built the train and,
Yeah, he was a philanthropist.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I really like the depiction of Thomas Wayne in this. And I like that he talks about working at the hospital and, being a doctor. It's something we haven't really seen before or since this movie, it seems like. I think if we're comparing Thomas Wayne's, the first few movies didn't really, we only saw him in flashback, and so he's not really a character even in the films. But so really the only two Thomas Waynes that I can really compare it to are the one from Joker, which I think you were talking about, and then for Batman vs Superman, which we only get that one scene. And visually, I think Jeffrey Dean Morgan looks like how I always kind of envision Thomas Wayne to look, with the mustache and everything. And then you have the Thomas Wayne from Joker that is a much different take on Thomas Wayne. But you also have to remember that movie is from Joker's point of view. So it's whether or not that
That's
version of Thomas Wayne is accurate or not. But I love this version of Thomas Wayne. I really liked it, and I think Linus Roach does a good job. I had never seen Linus Roach in anything before. He was big on Law and Order, but I didn't really watch Law and Order, before seeing this movie. So, he was new to me. Show. The whole cast in this movie is really good, and it's actually one of the things about this movie, this whole trilogy of movies. Although I'm trying not to bring up Dark Knight or Dark Knight Rises while we talk about this, but the whole cast of these films are incredible. You've got Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon. You got Michael Caine as Alfred. Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox. Yeah. And then in this movie, you've got Cillian Murphy as Dr. Crane / Scarecrow, Tom Wilkinson as Carmine Falcone, and of course, Liam Neeson as Henry Ducard / Ra's al Ghul. Speaking of that, so Ra's al Ghul, Ra's al Ghul, I did a little research on this. Apparently, the guy who created the character intended for it to be pronounced Ra's al Ghul, but I think it's Arabic pronunciation of the word is actually more Ra's al Ghul. So I think Christopher Nolan, I guess, just decided to go with the more Arabic pronunciation rather than what was intended by the creator of the comic. So because he's referred to as Ra's al Ghul in this movie, that's how I'm going to say it throughout this podcast, rather than going, it's actually Ra's al Ghul. Because even though it might be in the comics,
I'll probably say Raish because I've kind of gotten in the habit of calling him Raish as of late. So,
and that's how he's pronounced on the animated series. That's how he's pronounced in the Arkham games. But in this movie, it's pronounced Ra's al Ghul. So that, it doesn't, I don't care. However you want to say it. I'm just going to say it that way.
I'll
so that way,
it out.
If anybody, comments saying you're pronouncing it wrong, I'm just doing it that way because that's how they pronounce it in this movie. They also pronounce it that way on the Arrow TV show. They pronounce it Ra's al Ghul rather than Ra's al Ghul. So it's like nobody can actually make up their mind as to how they want to say it. But anyway, Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul is pretty incredible. Spoiler alert. I guess if you've never seen Batman Begins, he's Ra's al Ghul. And even like some of the smaller characters like Mr. Earl, played by Rutger Hauer, he's really good. Mark Boone Jr., who plays Flass. You've got who else?
Flass is the dirty cop.
Yeah, the one that gets strung up upside down.
Right.
Swear to me. That whole scene. So yeah, but anyway, the cast of this movie is incredible. My only nitpick, I guess you could say, is because this movie, since we now have the trilogy of movies, and we know that Katie Holmes does not reprise her role in The Dark Knight, I kind of wish that Maggie Gyllenhaal had just been in this movie rather than Katie Holmes, and then changing the casting for Dark Knight.
I'll tell you something though. I used to not like her that much, and I like Katie Holmes.
Okay.
And I really think that her performance of Rachel here is like it's good.
It is good.
And I would not prefer Maggie Gyllenhaal personally. In
Well,
fact,
would you probably would rather have Katie
it's
Holmes
funny.
be in The Dark Knight?
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
thinking that. And like when Dark Knight came out, I was the same way. I was like, Maggie Gyllenhaal's so much better than Katie Holmes. But like after watching this, I was like, I felt like there was more of a connection. I don't know. They had a pretty good connection, I felt like.
Yeah, and I don't think she's bad in this movie by any means. I'm just speaking from a continuity standpoint. You know, it's
Sure.
it's like the same reason I kind of wish Mark Ruffalo was in The Incredible Hulk rather than, even though Edward Norton is awesome in that movie, just because that movie now feels disconnected from the rest of the Marvel universe. You know, I wish it had been Mark Ruffalo from the beginning, or I wish that, well, I don't know, because I think Mark Ruffalo is really, really good as Banner / the Hulk, but it would have been interesting to see Edward Norton in the Avengers movie or something, you know? What do you think? Obviously, you like this movie as well. You said you saw it multiple times in the theater. What did you think of Christian Bale's performance as Batman / Bruce Wayne?
If you asked me on a regular day, I would say it's decent. You know, it's good. But watching it and having to think about that for the podcast, I was like, my personal favorite, I think the best suited person for Bruce Wayne we've had is Ben Affleck.
Mm-hmm.
And he does a fantastic job. I'd say nostalgia wise and everything, Michael Keaton's probably my favorite.
Sure.
But each person that we've had play Bruce Wayne is kind of, I mean, I'm not talking about George Clooney. I don't count him. Sorry, George, if you ever hear this, I like some of your movies. They're good, but
he's going to destroy this podcast now. He'll see that we never do another podcast.
Honest, you know, like that's I think that's important. Anyway, Val Kilmer, I'll give him a pass because I thought he did a pretty good job. And it's not George Clooney's fault.
No, it's not.
But anyway,
it's funny. I used to always think, not to interrupt you here, but I used to always think George Clooney was a good Bruce Wayne, but not necessarily a great Batman. I don't know if I don't know. I mean, I don't think he's a bad Bruce Wayne by any means. I think they're all kind of different. I think Val Kilmer was a great Bruce Wayne.
I just don't like the Bruce Wayne that was in
Batman and Robin. Right. Yeah. Which is not Clooney, which is, like you said, is not Clooney's fault.
If he had different directing, like he might have had a really awesome Batman and Bruce Wayne, but that didn't happen. And that's not necessarily Joel Schumacher's fault either.
It's Warner Brothers' fault, really, probably more than anything, because I know that they wanted them to push more toy sales with that movie.
Exactly. Right.
I kind of agree with you with your list there. Michael Keaton has always been my favorite Batman. Due to nostalgia, well, I mean, he's amazing, but also due to nostalgia. And I think it's probably Ben Affleck now. I think Ben Affleck is both an amazing Bruce Wayne and an amazing Batman.
Yeah.
I love Christian Bale in this movie.
Yeah.
And I think this is his best performance as Batman. And then even though I don't, spoiler alert, this isn't my favorite of the Dark Knight trilogy. I do think he went a little farther with the voice in the subsequent films. You know, It's kind of the mimicked,
right.
I'm Batman type voice that he does. And he doesn't do it quite so over the top in this film.
Right. Right.
And I wish that he had continued this voice in those other films.
Right. I agree.
I think the only time we really kind of hear that voice is when he's interrogating Flash, asking where the drugs are going and stuff.
He's trying to be intimidating.
And he kind of gets into that gravelly voice. But when he's like talking to Rachel, when Rachel first sees him and she goes after him, she tries to tase him and he just pulls the taser off. He's talking he's disguising his voice, but it's not like.
Right. It's not gravelly.
Right.
But it's not Bruce Wayne either.
Right.
Yeah. And then when he actually when he says that last thing, like that quote of hers,
Mm-hmm.
he's almost talking, I think, in a Bruce Wayne voice. Like he
Right.
almost isn't even doing a voice at all.
Yeah. That's my favorite. I don't know if maybe that's not my favorite scene, but that moment has always kind of given me chills. I don't know what it is about that. But it's one of my favorite moments of the movie where she's like, "Wait, you could die. At least tell me your
Mhm.
name." And he turns to her and says the line that she
Yeah.
said to him, it's not who I am underneath, but what I
Right.
do that defines me. And she goes, Bruce. And then he just jumps off the roof and the music swells and everything.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's like one of the best. I love
It's
that.
good.
Yeah.
It's good.
That scene's incredible. I like the suit too, the Batman suit.
Yes, it's very cool.
It's funny because well, again, I don't want to talk too much about the other movies, but like the Dark Knight and the Dark Knight Rises, he has more of it's like a skinnier bat suit, and it fits him very well in those movies. And so now this one almost seems bulky, but in this movie it works really well. He's very intimidating in it, and it looks great. I really like the suit a lot.
And I like how it's interesting to think about the evolution of Batman and when he was created, because obviously the original Batcave, like what did he have in it? Like maybe
like the '89 Batcave, or like the
I'm
Adam
talking
West
like
Batcave.
yes, like well, I mean, was there not a Batcave in the comics before?
No, yeah, I'm sure there was. Yeah, I don't
I'm
know
talking
what
about
it was. Yeah,
like did he have like radar machines down there?
maybe.
Like maybe
Yeah, I
he
don't
had a
know.
couple machines that could control rockets, but now he's got this like high-tech superhuman almost esque like armor. He's been trained by ninjas. He
Mm-hmm.
has a tank for a vehicle. And it's cool, like it's a different take on, he didn't necessarily invent all of his gadgets.
Right.
We've like Lucius Fox, did he invent all that stuff or was he just in control of it?
I think
He was just in control,
I think he
right?
was kind of like overseeing it. He probably
Yeah,
had a hand in it. But yeah,
right,
I think he was just kind of like the department head.
right. So, but instead of and Bruce is supposed to be, basically a super genius.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they necessarily
They don't really
are
do that in this movie
focusing that
anyway. Yeah.
on in this, but he has, because he's rich and knows the right people and has the money, he has access to all of these gadgets and devices that have basically fallen in his lap.
Mm-hmm.
And being a determined person that he is, he definitely they definitely show that at the beginning of the movie when they take you through the training process and everything. He's a billionaire, but he's living in like even when he's coming back to the helicopter when Alfred goes to pick him up and he mentions
The
he's got
mud.
mud on him. And
Yeah.
I'm like, he's a billionaire and he's like just like hardcore survival mode. And so he's a very uh strong person, strong-willed, and I don't remember where I was going with that, but
I hate when that happens. But I like where you're going with that though, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about with this movie is that again, in comparison to like Batman and Robin, Christopher Nolan clearly wanted to make this film as realistic as possible.
right.
And I think that was kind of genius to have, rather, like you said, rather than having him create all of these gadgets and everything, using the company that his father had built, and and using those items that had already been made, and making that work for him and everything. Um, I also, one of the things that's obviously very different about this movie versus previous Batman films is we didn't really have an origin story with those other movies, which I loved. As a kid, I didn't want to see an origin story. I just wanted to see Batman. So the 1989 Batman was like the perfect movie since he's Batman from the very beginning.
Right.
But in this movie, it takes an hour before we actually even see him in costume.
Right.
And so it's, somewhat based on Frank Miller's Year One. And we, seeing him train and become the, ninja, I guess that he is, the superhero who hides in the shadows, and And I like, I remember loving seeing he's got like a lesson with Liam Neeson, and they've got the gunpowder and they're throwing it on the ground, and he's like using this as a weapon, and he was like, or deception, and it's like just seeing Batman kind of find his tricks and stuff like that. I just thought it was so cool seeing that for the first time.
And they could do that with this because everyone watching this movie knows Batman.
Right.
So they know that he uses those things and then as you're watching that as an audience, you're like, oh, like 95% of the audience is like, that's where he
right. Oh, this is so cool. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then seeing, once he gets back to Gotham and he's discovering the Batcave, and he's ordering the that's one of my, I love that scene too, with Alfred like smashes one of the cows, and he's like it's not up to specifications, but they assure us that the next one will be how we want them. And he's like, well, at least we'll have spares, because they had to order like 10,000 of them at a time or something to avoid suspicion. Just seeing him piece together his suit and everything. And I love when he first goes out and talks to Gordon, he's wearing like the bat suit, but he doesn't have the cape yet. And he's just wearing a ski mask. And so when he has to like jump off the building, he realizes, okay, I need something to help me get around a little easier. And that's how he figures out the
he probably broke a rib.
Oh, probably.
I mean, he was wearing that suit, but that looked painful.
It did look painful.
And he did a good, I mean, unless it was real, Christian Bale did a good job showing that it hurt.
Right. Yeah. It's a good actor, that Christian Bale, unless he actually
he's going places. Hurting. He's going places.
Yeah. People, I wouldn't be surprised if he does another couple of good movies. And that material, the memory cloth, I have never obviously seen that in real life, but supposedly that was based on like real technology.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That was like 2005.
Yeah, it was 16 years ago, I guess. So, now I could be wrong, but I feel like I remember reading that Christopher Nolan was trying to use as much like real technology as possible for this film, and memory cloth or something was actually a real thing. But that's one of the things that I love that, had never been done before as well, at least not in the movies, was, Batman had always had a cape, but it was just a cape. And now this is like, it actually serves a function, it is like kind of a hang glider for him, and, gives us provides believability for when he jumps off buildings and survives and things like that. You know what I mean? So it was perfect. It was, yeah, I really like that part a lot. I wanted to also talk about the villains of the film. One of the things I find so interesting about reboots, and I guess this has only happened a couple of times, but they, rather than I'm thinking specifically of this movie and The Amazing Spider-Man, rather than taking a villain we've already seen, they take villains that are new to the franchise. And in fact, I remember when Batman and Robin came out back in 97, I remember reading in a magazine that they were going to have Scarecrow in Batman 5, and that it was going to be they were talking to Howard Stern about playing Scarecrow.
That I think sounds familiar. I think if you didn't bring this up to me, I'm pretty sure
you heard the same thing. Yeah.
But I totally forgot that.
Yeah. And so I just find it interesting that, obviously Batman 5 was scrapped and they did Batman Begins, but they kept Scarecrow as one of the villains. And then I have no idea if Ra's al Ghul was supposed to be in Batman 5 or if they decided to throw him into this movie. But I've always found it interesting that they don't just like kind of start over with the villains. They move on. Same with Amazing Spider-Man. Rather than doing like Green Goblin again, or even Dr. Octopus again, they went to the Lizard, which we had not seen yet before. Even though
there really haven't been any superhero reboots except for Spider-Man and Batman and Superman.
Right. Yeah. And even Spider-Man Homecoming, which I guess you could say is a reboot as well.
Yeah. Oh, it
they
is,
went
definitely.
They went with Vulture, which was again another villain that we had not seen yet. But like with the new Batman, the Robert Pattinson Batman, we're getting the Riddler, and Catwoman. So we're back to villains that we have seen before, but we're obviously seeing them in a much different way. And Penguin, he's in it too. I knew somebody was also in it. But yeah, I always found that interesting that Batman Begins chose to go with new villains rather than repeating, which I'm glad they did, and I think it works really well. The big theme in this movie is fear, and so having Scarecrow in the movie just makes sense thematically.
Yeah.
And then having Ra's al Ghul be the person that like trains Bruce and everything. I mean, it worked really, really
the
well.
Story, everything, the plot is so well knit together.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know David S. Goyer did this movie.
It's actually,
huh?
well, I was gonna say that's one of the questions I had because Christopher Nolan and his brother wrote Dark Knight and they wrote Dark Knight Rises, even though David S. Goyer does have a story credit on both of those films. But I was curious because David S. Goyer has the story credit on this film, and then Christopher Nolan and David S. Goyer wrote the screenplay. So I kind of was thinking that Christopher Nolan pitched his take on Batman to Warner Brothers, but I wonder if he was one of many directors who kind of pitched their take on Batman or something to Warner Brothers, and Christopher Nolan was chosen rather than it being like Christopher Nolan had an idea for a Batman movie and approached the studio.
Interesting,
yeah, like it was more of a job for hire type thing, and it worked out really well for him and the studio, and then he kind of got to do his own ideas for the sequels and stuff or something. Right. Like I said, David S. Goyer has a story credit though on Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, but so does Christopher Nolan, I think. And whereas this one, it's just David S. Goyer.
Right.
Had you heard or did you know who he was before this movie?
That's what I was actually going to ask. It was, what else has he done?
The movies that I know him from primarily are the Blade movies. He wrote all 3 Blade movies, directed the 3rd one.
Okay.
So he kind of like most of the movies that he's known for, I would argue, are comic book movies. Blade, I think he had a story credit on the sequel to Ghost Rider, and then Man of Steel, obviously, and Batman vs Superman. I think he co-wrote the screenplay on that one. So I know he's done other things, but I think the bulk of his filmography are comic book movies.
Yeah, I love the villain pick too. I think it fits really well. The fear.
Mm-hmm. I like Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow. Apparently, he auditioned for Batman. There's if you search for it on YouTube, you can see like his audition footage. Yeah.
What? Interesting.
He obviously was not the right choice for Batman, but
he was the right choice for Crane.
But he was an excellent choice for Crane.
Oh, it's so good.
And I love the design of the character. I love that he's just wearing, up until the end of the movie, he's just wearing his suit with the mask. And I think the mask looks really good. It
does. It's a classic.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they also dip it in realism because, like the other Scarecrow that we had seen was from the animated series and comics. I wouldn't have read the comics, so I don't know really how different he would have looked in comics at this time. But
I remember him from the Super Friends TV show too. He was on that. He was part of the Legion of Doom. And he looks
like from the 70s.
Yeah, and he looks like a Scarecrow.
Maybe 80s. I don't know. 70s probably.
Yeah, I think the one I'm thinking of, I think, is the one from the 70s because I think it's like the one with Casey Kasem as the voice of Robin and stuff. But yeah, he just looks like a Scarecrow, and that's kind of how he looks on the animated series. They changed his appearance a few times on the animated series. They couldn't quite decide what they wanted him to look like.
Well, that was I think when it was switching studios.
Yeah.
Because at least the art style changed a little bit. And I don't know if that was because the studio's changing or what, but yeah, I know what you mean. Because the Joker changed as well.
Right.
When he got even
even before that though, I remember there's one episode of the animated series where Scarecrow is kind of thin and looks like a Scarecrow, and then later he's got kind of the wider face and he almost has the teeth kind of pointing out, if you recall. And then they changed him again when they changed studios, like you said, and they redesigned all the characters.
Okay.
So he changed character. I could look it up and show you, but he changed appearances a couple times. But he's always kind of looked like a Scarecrow, he's got straw sticking out of his he's got mask and stuff like that.
Bag on
right? Yeah, exactly.
And no hat, but but it's cool because he's not trying to look necessarily like a scarecrow in this. He is to a degree because he knows that the effects, the hallucinations that they're gonna have are just as you got to see one when he has the maggots on his
Right, right.
face, and
Yes.
I love how they showed the perspective of from the people that had been poisoned and we're
Oh
seeing,
yeah.
when Batman's flying overhead and he looks like a demon, like you
Right,
just see
yeah.
like fire coming from his eyes and mouth, and
And
I thought
like when
that was really
Scarecrow is on
cool.
the horse and he rears the horse back and it's
Yes.
breathing the fire and stuff. Like, yeah, I do love the I don't know what you call that, I guess, the Scarecrow gas perspective. And I love too when Batman sprays Crane with the gas and then we see Batman's face and it's
Yeah, he's like a melting.
yeah, he's got
He's
like
weird.
ooze coming out of his mouth almost. Yeah, it is weird. It's cool though. I liked it a lot.
Now he says a line in that, and he says, "I'm sorry, Dr. Crane is not in right now. Please leave a message
Yeah, yeah.
if you'd like to make an appointment." And I was wondering when he said that, I was like, why did he say that? Is he mocking Batman? Or is he so terrified that he's hoping that this creature is actually going to believe that they got a voicemail, so he's not there?
That's actually kind of funny. I like to think it's that one. But and it's funny because it works because then Batman like throws him down. He's like,
Yeah.
he's done for. Um,
He's like, I'll try anything. Like he's got to just be completely delusional, like with fear.
that's kind of what I assumed. I assumed the fear was just taking over so much that he almost shut down, and his kind of go-to response was to just be just to give that message, basically.
Right.
Well, what do you think? Well, since we're talking about villains here, what do you think about Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul?
Amazing.
Yeah, incredible.
So good. And I love the plot twist about how,
He's
did they ever say his name before?
Henry Ducard, who's a character from the comics,
Okay.
and Ken Watanabe is posing as Ra's al
Right.
Ghul, and then
Which
we see
another amazing actor.
yes, agreed, and then we see him die in the beginning when which I thought was kind of funny. You know, it was obviously an accident. He didn't intend for Ra's al Ghul to die or Ken Watanabe's character to die. But Bruce is like, I won't murder this guy. He's like, I'm not going to do it. And then he burns down the building, and and by doing that, kills Ra's al Ghul. Um, but anyway, but like I said, it wasn't like intentional. He wasn't, you know, trying to kill. And actually, he didn't really. He was fighting Ra's al Ghul, and then the thing fell on him. So it wasn't, it wasn't really.
Right.
I mean, Bruce.
Well,
Is the one
they were gonna kill him.
they were going to kill him for sure. Yes. And like I said, and even though Bruce set the building on fire, it wasn't necessarily Bruce who killed him, I guess. But so as an audience, we're meant to think that Ra's al Ghul is dead. He died in the beginning of the film.
And I really like how they did that, like, because I remember putting myself in Bruce's shoes, and like literally, you have an entire squad of ninjas around you that have trained you to be
Yeah.
an assassin, and they're telling you to kill this person, and if you don't, they will kill you.
Right.
So he's like, and then he does it anyway, and I don't know what I would have done in his situation, but I like to think I would have.
You'd like to think that you would stand up for what you believe in, even though it surely means death. But yeah, it's a tough choice. But clearly, we couldn't see. Bruce Wayne, Batman is not going to kill anybody, and so
Right.
he stuck to his guns, and then he saved Ducard's life, which only came back to bite him later, because Ducard was actually Ra's al Ghul, and Ra's al Ghul was very upset that Bruce Wayne burned down his house, and also he, really, even though I don't think Ra's al Ghul is getting revenge on Bruce Wayne, but he's the whole plan from the beginning of the movie, even when Ken Watanabe was posing as Ra's al Ghul, was Gotham must be destroyed. Gotham is so evil that it needs to just be completely destroyed and regrown.
Yes, the
basically.
League of Shadows has been around for thousands of years,
Right.
and has been resetting when corruption gets too thick in the
right.
in the powers that be. I thought that I loved the plan and the scheme of putting the chemical in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, and you have the detective work going on. They're like, why would they? We've had it, for months. It's
Yeah,
been
it's
in
been
here.
in our
Like,
water
it's not
supply.
affecting anyone.
Right.
And then they mentioned that it had to be airborne. And you're like, well, how are they gonna?
And the microwave emitter that had been stolen from Wayne Enterprises. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great. I love, I like how the plot unfolds and we, kind of figure this stuff out as we go. I like too. I think there's a scene with Bruce Wayne where he finds out, he's talking to Lucius, and Lucius says something like, "Oh, well, you could probably vaporize the water with a microwave emitter,
Right.
just like the one that had recently gone missing from Wayne
Right.
Enterprises." And Bruce was like, "Gone missing?" Like he's like, this is pertinent information. Yeah, but no, yeah, the plot is. I love the plot, and I love how Ra's al Ghul is working with Scarecrow. He's there, and then Scarecrow is working with Carmine Falcone to get the shipment of drugs, to the right place, and so yeah, it's a very well thought out story, I think, and it works really, really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did want to say, I love the final. Oh, the Batmobile. We haven't we briefly mentioned the Tumbler.
Yeah.
But
We didn't even talk about Alfred either.
No, we didn't. We need to talk about Michael Caine.
Jeez. Yeah.
But the Tumbler, real quick. One of the big moments of the movie is when Rachel has been drugged by Crane, and Batman has to get her back to the Batcave so he can give her the antidote. And it's the whole police chase with the Batmobile. That scene, I remember just loving that scene. Still love that scene. I think it looks really good. There's a couple times where like the Tumbler being on the roof kind of looks like a miniature. I don't know if I'm assuming it is a miniature set and miniature Batmobile. But otherwise, I think that whole scene is really, really good.
Yeah, I love too the some of the funny things that the
cops say and stuff.
Yeah, there's a couple that were a couple cringy.
Right.
Like the one that's like, just tell me what it looks like. I'm like, they've been chasing him for 10 minutes and no one has told him what this car looks like.
Well, they've said it's a tank like several times. The guy's just not listening.
I think he was asleep and just
right.
But I think my favorite one is when they're like, what road's he on? He's like, he's not on a road, he's hopping across rooftops.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you've got the obligatory, I gotta get me one of those, which Gordon says, which is almost a little cringy too, but it's like you almost have to say that type of line.
It was Gary Oldman. It's okay.
Yeah. We will forgive him. Yeah, exactly.
Garrett, we didn't even talk. Yeah, we still need to talk about Alfred and
Gary
Gordon.
Oldman. Yeah. Michael Caine is a great choice for Alfred. He obviously knocks it out of the park. I love him as Alfred. I am looking forward to one day getting a Batman live action film where Alfred kind of looks like the Alfred from the comics / animated series, kind of
with the
mustache and just kind of skinny and like, I don't know, but I love
like very poised.
Yes, exactly.
But
yes.
a butler.
Right.
Yeah.
But I love this version of Alfred.
He's so good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Michael Caine just is an incredible actor.
Yeah.
And brings that here. And you have some of those, there's a couple emotional scenes where he's like angry at Bruce, but he's that loving, not even, his grandfather, but he is,
right.
And kind of a dad, and he's just everything.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. Right after that car chase, Alfred comes to him and he goes, when you told me about this crazy idea of yours, you said it wasn't about thrill seeking.
Right.
And Bruce is like,
oh, he was mad.
And then he's like, then what do you call that? Like pointing to the TV. Yeah. He does a great job. And then I also, the tender moments kind of really work with him too.
Yes.
At the end, or not the end, but before like the big kind of final act of the movie, Bruce is watching his house burn down. They're in the Batcave and he's like looking up the elevator shaft and he's like, I've ruined everything, and Alfred tells him the line that his father told him. He's like, why do we fall? So we can learn to pick ourselves back up. And Alfred and Bruce goes, you never gave up on me. And he goes, never, which is a line he said earlier in the movie. And I like that moment a lot. It's a very father-son moment. And it's really, really good.
Yeah. He clearly has a lot of support from one man. That is a lot of support just in itself because it's coming from Alfred. and who Alfred is. Yeah, and he gets kind of, emotional there a couple times too, where he's like, "You're destroying your
Your
father's
father's
name."
legacy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It still means something. Yeah. Because he gets mad at him before, he tells Alfred he needs to get rid of all the guests, for the party. And Alfred's like, those are Bruce Wayne's guests. The Wayne
right,
name still means something. Yeah.
right.
Um, and yet, even though Bruce does end up, he essentially kind of ruins, he doesn't ruin his father's name, I don't think, but he does ruin his own name a little bit because he pretends to be drunk and calls everybody freeloaders and stuff.
Yes,
And
it was pretty harsh.
it's a pretty harsh little scene.
He's like, This is not a joke. Just get out."
Right. And then you can Christian Bale again does an amazing moment, or does an amazing job here in this moment, because there's a Wayne, Enterprises board member or something who comes up to him and he says, "The apple has fallen far from the tree."
Yeah.
And you can tell that actually, like, it kind of affected Bruce. He's a little hurt by that, but he like has to move on quickly because he knows he's trying to save these people's lives and they don't even realize it.
Right.
But even through all that, Alfred sticks with him and doesn't, he's still proud of him. And then at the end of the movie, he's asking about how they're gonna rebuild the mansion, and Bruce is like, "I'll rebuild it the same it was brick by brick." And Alfred is the one that has the idea, like, well, maybe we should, make the Batcave better or something. And so he's very supportive. He's a very supportive father figure, and it works very, very well. Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon, I think he's quite possibly my favorite Commissioner Gordon that we've had so far.
Good.
He's pretty perfect as Jim Gordon.
Yeah.
And he's not even Commissioner Gordon in this movie. He's Sergeant Gordon for most of it, I think, and then he becomes Lieutenant Gordon at the end. Yeah. Yeah, you really, I mean, he's like straight out of the comics perfect, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think this is the best, so though you and I discussed and mentioned that Bruce Wayne isn't necessarily our favorite. One, he does an incredible job, Christian Bale. But there are so many amazing performances in this movie. Alfred, Lucius, Gordon, Bruce Wayne, Ra's al Ghul,
Crane.
Crane. All of them are just fantastic performances. I actually don't know if I have liked this movie more than I did after watching this. I was it was really good.
It's one of those movies where you don't watch it for a little while and you think about like The Dark Knight and whatever, and you kind of are like, yeah, Batman Begins, that's a good movie. And then you rewatch it and you're like, man, that's not just a good movie. That is a great movie.
If you remember, around the time that we were rooming, I had a Batman Begins poster.
Yeah.
On the wall. I was very proud to call myself a Batman Begins fan at the time and try to share that magic of it. Almost had, I remember thinking that watching this, it wasn't quite the magic of 89, but it was almost like the magic of just seeing Batman again in action in such
being taken seriously.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, it was like I think we all wanted a dark version of Batman again.
Right.
And I think, it was something I wasn't thinking of when I saw the set photos and stuff. I was expecting a more Tim Burton-esque Batman, and we didn't get a Tim Burton-esque Batman. We got a Christopher Nolan Batman, which was, better than I was even kind of expecting.
Right. Also, I was going to say, it didn't really hit me back in the day, but now, and it was actually, we talked about this before, and we'll obviously bring it up for The Dark Knight, but the theme.
Oh yeah.
I remember in The Dark Knight hearing the theme for the first time, I got really pumped up and excited.
Yeah.
But when this movie came out, you hadn't adapted it yet.
Right.
To thinking about it being Batman. But watching it this time, I was like, there's the Batman thing.
Yeah.
And it's really good.
It's interesting. I agree with you 100%, because the first time I saw this movie, that was probably maybe my one complaint, was that it didn't have an iconic theme like the 89 Batman. I couldn't think of how the music went after I walked out of the theater. Whereas like with, Batman, with Danny Elfman's Batman, I could hum that theme for, like immediately. But it wasn't. And so I remember thinking that for years, actually being like, yeah, I just wish it had like an iconic Batman music. And I remember when the trailer for The Dark Knight came out, I guess it was December of 2007, and it had that music in the preview. I was like, it did have an iconic Batman theme, and I just never really realized it. Yeah, I mean, the music is incredible, and it's the 89 Batman theme, I would argue, is more iconic, but this music,
when you hear it,
stands the test
Batman.
of time. Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I bet there's a lot of people that would recognize it.
For sure. I'm glad you brought that up. I almost would have forgotten to talk about the music. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard did the score for this film. And we got to talk about the ending scene, because that was another thing that kind of blew my mind back in the day. Was this, we see the bat signal for the first time, and
oh yeah,
Batman and Gordon are talking, and Gordon asks him about what about escalation, and Batman doesn't really know what he's saying, and Gordon kind of goes through the spiel. If we start wearing Kevlar, they buy armor piercing bullets, and blah 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 blah. And he goes, and you're wearing a mask and jumping off rooftops, and he talks about this guy that had
like
double homicide. Yeah, it was theatric. Has a taste for theatrics like you, and leaves a calling card. And it's one of those things where as soon as he hands over the evidence bag, we don't even see the front of the card. We can just tell that it's a playing card, and you just got immediately excited, because as soon as he flips it over, it's going to be a Joker card, and that was just incredible.
Yeah. I would imagine I saw this when it came out. At the time that it came out, I would imagine I saw it opening night, and I remember that the audience just
cheered,
definitely reacted to the Joker reveal.
Yeah. Which is actually, like, if you think about it, I mean, this is a Batman movie, so I mean, it's probably going to make a bunch of money, right? And it's the first Batman movie that had come out in 8 years, so it was a pretty safe bet that you were probably going to get a sequel to this movie. But I was thinking it's kind of ballsy to put that Joker teaser at the end of your movie, setting up for a sequel. You pretty much are saying, hey, Joker's going to be in the next movie.
Yeah, but at the same time, like if it hadn't done well, then they would have been like, well, that was just us showing that
it was an Easter egg,
a bigger universe out there.
Yeah, that's funny. I can cut this out, but the one note I wrote was the cop who lets Rachel over the bridge. Remember, like, they're closing the bridge because the gas has been released, like on where Arkham Asylum is. And she walks up, and the cop's like, no, we're closing the bridge. And she's like, I am the district attorney, blah, blah. And he's like, all right, fine.
Right.
And he lets her in. Well, then like 2 seconds later, they're still closing the bridge, and one of the like SWAT trucks comes up, and it's the one with the microwave emitter in it. And he's like, all right, one more truck can go through. And I'm like, this guy is like just the worst cop in the world.
I didn't pick up on that. That's hilarious.
Yeah. But the last thing I want to ask you is, did you recognize who the little boy is? So there's this. Okay. So I was curious if you knew who it was or not.
Yes.
You can do it.
Joffrey.
There you go.
Yes.
Joffrey Baratheon. That's right. This was, I remember when Game of Thrones came out, and I didn't really
show, by the way. I know that you don't like it now because of season 8, but man, up to that point, that show is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it's very good show up until the end, and it just ruined it.
Like season 5 was kind of like, it was really good, but I remember thinking, I think we're maybe going down a little bit. And then season 6, I don't remember what happened in that season, but by season 7, it was pretty awesome, because you had, what was that last like
season 6 was the one with the Battle of the Bastards, and I think it was
so good.
And I liked season 7, even though a bunch of people didn't.
I thought season 7 was good, and I really liked the if I remember correctly, I liked the battle. I remember there was one moment that just gave me chills, and I also just freaked out. It was pitch black, and I don't remember what it was, but then you started seeing all these torches or something like in the
Mm-hmm.
distance, like just being like, and you couldn't see the army, but you could see how big the army was based on the lights.
Right, right.
And it was pretty terrifying. It was a cool idea. We didn't wrap up yet.
No, let's go ahead and rate the film, I guess, John. Would you give
So I probably would have said originally 4 out of 5, but I think I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5.
I am also going to give it 4.5 out of 5. It's almost a 5-star movie for me. But I'm going to hold back a little bit and give it 4.5. It's darn near perfect. It's up there. I don't know. I've never made a like top 5 superhero films list, but it might break the top 5. Wow. I don't know. I'd have to really think about it though, because there's a lot that I like.
There's a lot of superhero movies.
And there's a lot of superhero movies. Yeah, I mean, I know like Spider-Man 2, The Dark Knight, obviously. I mean, there's I don't know. I'd have to kind of look at the list and see. Maybe it would make the top 5. Definitely the top 10.
Yeah, I might be there with you. There's a good chance in the top 10.
Well, we'd love to know what you think about Batman Begins. You can always leave us a comment on cinemaheroes.com. You can leave a comment on our Facebook, facebook.com/SM&SM podcast. You can tweet at us or comment on our Instagram. Both the handles are Cinema Heroes. You can also leave us a comment on this video on YouTube, obviously, if you're watching it. If you are watching it, give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel. We would love that. We'd love to hear from you any way you want to reach out to us. But I think that about wraps it up for this episode. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzo.
As always, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing.